Perfect.
Or you can tilt that screen back and that would be good. Now we can see your lovely face. Perfect.
Okay. Guten Abend.
Guten Abend.
Und danke für die Anladen. There we go. That's all I got. No follow-up questions, please. Well, good evening. And I want to thank you so much for not only being here, but for everything that you do to build our party. I don't think I need to sell you on the fact that this is a moment that none of us thought we'd find ourselves in. A moment that is full of great peril, but also a moment that is full of great possibility. The peril aspect, I think, is pretty clear. We have found ourselves at an inflection point where the threat to our country is not one from a foreign government, but the threat that we face actually sits in the Oval Office. We found ourselves at a moment where we cannot trust that the President of the United States has read and or cares about the Constitution. Where the President of the United States has not read nor care about the importance of the rule of law. Where the President of the United States does not care about the very oath that he took. We see that peril playing out every day. Where we right now, as a country, are facing a wholesale assault on everything that makes America America. We see it in stories like we heard from Douglas today, who is doing his part as somebody who loved this country, who had training and skills that he wanted to put to work to make life better for his neighbors and for the country that he loves. And so many, all of, I would argue, of the government employees that we are now seeing be fired unceremoniously are not the deep state. These are people who have deep love for their neighbors and their communities. Folks who do critical work, like making sure the plane I flew here on doesn't fall out of the damn sky. Folks who do the work of making sure that when Americans all across the country sit their kids down for dinner can have some level of surety that somebody tested that food and ensure that they're not serving their kids something that could harm them. Folks who may have served as they thought was best in uniform, and many came home out of uniform asking how can they serve those they have served alongside in the VA. People who are answering the calls of service members who are suffering with invisible wounds, who are now being let go unceremoniously with no thought, no care about what this work means for families. What this work means for people that needs a government that actually works for them and works for working families all across our country. So the peril part of what I wanted to talk about tonight is clear. And I think we could spend a lot of time talking about it. But I'd like to, in fact, spend more time talking about the great possibility that I think we have. One of the opportunities you get when folks tear stuff up is you get a chance to actually build something in its place. Here is the truth of this complex moment. Government was already not working for a lot of working people and working families. That is the hard reality. And we should be very clear that defeating Donald Trump, as we must, defeating the ideology that allows Donald Trump to thrive even in the face of his corruption and incompetence, that is the floor for what we have to do. That is the floor. We still have so much to do to restore people's basic faith and trust that government is there for them. There to change outcomes for their lives for the better. There to actually make the ability for people to live with basic decency and dignity, to make that a possibility. That is our hard work. And as Democrats, we have a much harder job. Because as a Republican, all you have to do is say, well, this table doesn't work, and then you kick the legs out under it to prove it doesn't work. As Democrats, we have the harder job of making sure the table is set for working people and working families. I highlight that dichotomy because we cannot accept as success just beating Donald Trump. I want to be very clear in a room full of Democrats. I am not a Democrat because I don't like the president. I did not run to be vice chair of this party just because I don't like that guy. I am a Democrat because I understand that a strong Democratic Party that remembers who the hell we are, remembers what we're fighting for, is a prerequisite for the families that I love and care about having the things that they need. We need a strong Democratic Party, and I know that you're all committed to doing the work to make sure we have it. We need a fighting Democratic Party to make sure that this guy that's trying to dismantle everything that we need, that he is out of the way. We need a forward-looking Democratic Party that is envisioning a world for when this ideology is purged from our government. I make this point about not being a Democrat because of this guy, because narcissists want everything to be about them, even if it's not good. But I want to be clear, when I became a Democrat, the only thing I knew about Donald Trump was that he had a cameo in Home Alone 2. That's all I knew about that guy. But what I did know was my own life and my own experience, which I know is not disconnected from many folks in this room and all across our country. As you heard me say before, I'm from North Philadelphia. If you know Temple, you know exactly where I'm from in Philadelphia. I was raised in a working poor family. My dad was trained as a social worker right there at the university. And he was lucky, as he was getting his degree, to one day meet this cute little thing named Kelly Kenyatta, my mom. And now I like to say this because it is fundamentally true. I hit the parental jackpot, okay? I got the best parents in the world, second only to your parents, who I assume were fantastic. But the trouble with my dynamic, wonderful parents was that as much as I thought they were fantastic, they did not see that in each other, and they hated each other. And so what that meant for me is my parents separated when I was pretty young. I lived 5 or 6 different places by the time I graduated high school. I got my first job at 12 years old, washing dishes at a little vegan soul food restaurant, if you can believe it. And what that little job did was to give my mom what so many families need, just a little bit of wiggle room. Some folks know what I mean about needing a little program called CHIP, which was how I had health care as a kid. Some folks know what I mean about needing access to affordable housing or a housing voucher, which is how we often kept a roof over our heads. Some folks know exactly what I mean about needing unemployment benefits when you find yourselves in between gigs, as we often had to rely on, or needing access to food assistance, knowing what it means to be in that grocery store, filling up your cart with great hopes and expectations until you get to the register. And you start looking at that number go up and up and up. And you starts coming out of the cart. And I would say, as an aside, my mama would always take out the stuff that I put in first, which I didn't think that was right. I lost my parents. I lost both of my parents by the time I was 27. Because they did not have access to the type of health care that every single person deserves. I lay this out for you to be clear about why I'm in this fight, about why I'm committed to this work. So often our political system gets boiled down to this tired old trope. You've seen it play out. Politician A says this. Politician B says this. And then all the news covers the argument between these two people. Where are the working families like mine who just want government to work for them? Where is that as a part of the conversation? The award-winning, Super Bowl-winning coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, Nick Sirianni, is prone to say something that I have stolen, Coach Nick. He says it is our job to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing is this. We deserve a government that works for working people and working families. And the Democratic Party is the only entity that is ready, willing, and able to do it. It's not coming from the Republican Party, I promise you that. But it is not good enough for us to just talk about working people. It's not good enough for us to just feature working people in our advertisements. It's not good enough for us to just allude to the crises facing working families. We have to be a party that makes shit work for working people and working families. That's our job. That's the work we have. That's the work we must do together. And Lord, I hope that you are committed to doing that work, even here, thousands of miles away from where you used to call home. That work is work that none of us can do by ourselves, and frankly, that work is work that began long before we got here. Kenton has heard me tell this story before, but Lord knows it is one that has made the moment we find ourselves in crystal clear. My grandmother and grandfather were lions of the civil rights movement. You think of something, they were in it. So I get it honest. But my grandmother called me the last time this guy found his way to the White House. And I could tell that a woman as tough as she was had just finished crying. I could hear it in her voice. And she said to me, "Baby, I'm so sorry." She said, "I'm so sorry, because I thought our generation had fixed some of this stuff. And here you are, a young man finding yourselves fighting the same battles I thought we had won. And I have gone all across our country and now here in Germany to say to you what I said to her. It is just our turn. It is our turn to ensure that this fragile experiment in self-government does not die on our watch. It's our turn to make sure our party is committed to a vision of our future where people get to have such luxuries as health care when they're sick. That people have the ability to go to that doctor instead of putting it off because they're too scared about what the cost might be on the other side. That people have the ability to have one good family-sustaining job, hopefully backed up by a union. That job puts them in a position where they can buy a house in a community that is safe. That their kids have the ability to go to a school where they can actually learn the things they need to learn, not just hide under their desk because an active shooter is in their building. That those kids get to then go on and have a family-sustaining job of their own. And that the parents who raise them get to retire with a level of dignity and decency in the home that they raised them. That's what this party has to be about every single day. That's the work that we have to ensure that we're doing. But we have to be clear on this point. We have to have more than a message as a party. We have to have a mission. We have to have more than a slogan. We have to have a strategy. We have to be more than frustrated. We have to be furiously focused on the future of this country, no matter where our citizens live. And Democrats abroad, you know you are such a big part of it. I hope you know you're such a big part of it. In critical elections all across the country, you are making the difference. You heard me mention before in our Q&A that there are elections that we have won with a handful of votes, many of those votes coming from overseas. Don't forget your power. There is a reason that would-be autocrats and kings try to go after history first. You know this is not new with folks trying to ban books. It is not new with governments trying to disappear people who speak out against their policies. It is not new for leaders to call the press the enemy of the people. It's not new. Even "Make America Great Again" is not a new slogan. Even that was recycled from the past. And so our commitment has to also be grounded in the fact that we are not starting from scratch. We benefit from a long line of people who were courageous enough and had enough vision to build something that they didn't see. That's the story of Democrats abroad. 61 years ago, folks getting together, building something that they did not see because they knew it ought to be there. That is our mission as well in this moment. To build a future for our country that seems impossible. But to be here in Germany as a poor black gay kid from North Philly, I'm telling you, there were a lot of people who had to have a lot of big dreams for this to be a reality. There were folks who you understand, who organized at Seneca Falls and all across the country, engaged in hunger strikes because they believed in a future where women could fully participate in this democracy. There were folks who showed up at Stonewall, who pushed back, who demanded that in a country as great as ours, they deserve the opportunity to be exactly who the hell they are and to live with the dignity and decency that comes along with it. There were folks who organized at bus counters, at bus stops, who showed up at coffee house counters, who engaged in peaceful civil disruption because they understood not what the outcome was going to be, but they understood that what they were doing was worth fighting for. And in this moment, where things are dark, when things are scary, I think it's important for us to dig into that well of history. To be reminded that the folks that we venerate, they didn't have a map either. What they had was a commitment to show up, to do what they could do. James Baldwin has a quote that has driven so much of my life. He says, "You go the way your blood boils." And what I've always taken from that, along with so much of his work, a very famous expat, by the way, was that it's incumbent upon all of us to do the thing that we were called to do. I said it before, but sometimes that nagging anxiousness that you feel when you say, well, somebody should be doing this, it might be because it's for you to do. And the passion that you bring with it might be just enough to bring some people along. That is how movements start. That's how big change is made. That's how we sustain and build and reinvigorate our party for the future. Now, I know that there are folks who believe that the Democratic Party's time has passed. Some of you may believe it from time to time. But what I believe is that in this moment, it's not just about the message, it's about the messenger. And I think this is a moment where a new generation of leaders are going to rise up and work in an intergenerational way to face the challenges that we face in this moment, to face them head on, to not be afraid of them, but to run toward them, to not be despondent, but to be dedicated. We have to be just as committed to ensuring this democracy works as the people who would have it not. It's going to be that commitment that's not just going to defeat a guy in the White House, but it's going to be that commitment that allows this Democratic Party to be rebuilt, to be reinvigorated, and to be a party that is, once again, a party by and for working people and working families. And so I want to thank you for the opportunity of being a part of this story. I want to thank you for the role that you play. And God bless you. Let's go save this country. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.